There's something profoundly unsettling about an isolated farmhouse in the dead of night, especially one that seems to watch you back. Imagine a place so remote that the nearest neighbor is a half-mile of dense Bavarian woods away, where the wind through the trees carries every creak and groan straight into your bones. This is Hinterkaifeck, a name now synonymous with one of Germany's most blood-curdling unsolved mysteries. On the evening of March 31st, 1922, 6 people called that farm home. Andreas Gruber, the patriarch, strong but secretive. Cecilia, his wife in the autumn of her life. Their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, hardened by years of family scandal. Victoria's children, 7-year-old Cecilia, curious and bright, and 2-year-old Josef, toddling through the straw. And a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, just 44, arriving that afternoon. But the roots of this nightmare reach back long before that night. Hinterkaifeck was more than just a remote farm. It was a family with a dark, tangled history. It was common knowledge in the surrounding villages that Andreas had repeatedly raped his daughter Victoria from the time she was a teenager. When she tried to escape, first by marrying Karl Gabriel in 1914, then through a later relationship with neighbor Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the shadow of her father's violence never lifted. Court records show Andreas served a year in prison and Victoria 1 month after a report from their previous maid. Yet when she returned to Hinterkaifeck, the abuse resumed, fueling whispers and fear in equal measure. In the weeks before the massacre, strange signs multiplied. One day in March, Andreas discovered a newspaper on the doorstep, one that no one in the area subscribed to. When he searched the machine room later, he found that the lock had been forced open. Then came the footprints, 2 sets, leading from the edge of the forest to the farmhouse door. Tracks fresh in the snow, but none returning toward the woods. And at night, footsteps echoed overhead in the attic. Strange piles of straw appeared there, almost as if someone were trying to muffle their own movements. Andreas mentioned these eerie incidents to neighbors, but refused any help or to alert the authorities. On March 31st, Maria Baumgartner arrived to begin her duties, escorted by her sister, who left after an hour, unaware of the terror to come. That evening, the family gathered as usual, tending animals and stoking the hearth. But by dawn, something had gone horribly wrong. Young Cecilia didn't arrive at school on April 1st, and the family missed Sunday worship. Coffee sellers knocked at the locked door and peered in through frosted windows, but they saw nothing and simply went on their way. Days later, on April 4th, local mechanic Albert Hoffner arrived to repair the farm's engine. He worked for hours before leaving, hearing nothing but animals, and attributing the silence to a midday nap. Later that afternoon, Victoria's ex-lover, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, sent his sons to investigate. When they found no response, he and 2 neighbors pried open the barn door and stepped into a living nightmare. Straw-laden bodies lay strewn across the floor, their skulls cleaved by the very mattock they kept among the farm tools. It was determined that little Cecilia had survived the initial blows, tearing handfuls of her hair out in agony as she lay dying. Josef and Maria lay dead inside the house, their rooms undisturbed except for the still bodies. In the days that followed, everything pointed to a perpetrator who lingered in the house. Someone had fed the cattle, eaten the Grubers' bread, and even started fires in the fireplace to warm themselves. They'd used the family's mattock, yet they left money, jewelry, and even Victoria's wallet untouched. No obvious motive, no eyewitnesses, and a crime scene rendered almost meaningless by crowds of onlookers who trampled evidence before the police arrived. The case soon swelled with suspects, over 400 by some counts, but none stood trial. Among the prime persons of interest, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, resentful lover and neighbor, knew the farm's every nook and arrived first at the scene, calmly unlocking doors as if he owned the place. The Taylor brothers, caught burgling the farm years earlier, they threatened the former maid who'd fled because of the haunting noises. The phantom husband Karl Gabriel, officially killed in World War I, but his body never recovered, rumored to have stalked the property in an officer's coat. Matthias Perterer, a farmhand dismissed months earlier after a bitter dispute with Andreas over stolen potatoes. Perterer's boots were measured but didn't match the prints in the snow, and he produced an alibi. He was working in a neighboring village. Victoria's estranged brother, Franz Renhackel, who inherited a share of the farm and, according to hearsay, had threatened to seize full control. He furnished documents to prove he was hundreds of kilometers away that day. Local handyman Georg H., who'd done odd jobs at Hinterkaifeck and was rumored to harbor resentment over unpaid wages. Yet Georg's wife insisted he was home, sick with influenza on the day of the murders, and his footprints, later compared, didn't fit. Each theory held a grim logic, but each crumbled under scrutiny, and no strong evidence tied any one of them conclusively to the slaughter. Conspiracy theories flourished. Some villagers spoke of a family curse linked to a medieval donation of the land to a nearby abbey, an ancient wrongdoing demanding gruesome recompense. Others spread rumors of a sexual predator or vagrant who'd staked out the house for weeks. Yet no credible evidence supported these tales, and each wild assertion further muddied the search for truth. Inspector Koch of the Munich State Police led a team of detectives who interviewed countless witnesses, dusted every beam for prints, and even enlisted clairvoyants in local seances, attempting to divine the killer's identity through communion with spirits. A medium claimed the murderer was buried beneath the footprints, but no subsequent lead emerged. Higher authorities demanded results, but the Bavarian countryside offered few resources. With no confessions extracted and no weapon recovered, the trail went cold. Newspapers at the time decried the poor showing of German justice, and neighboring countries watched with horrified fascination. In the summer heat, flies swarmed the untouched crime scene before investigators finally sanitized the farmhouse, destroying potential forensic clues in the process. By year's end, the official files were closed with no arrest, no trial, and no certainty. Decades passed, yet Hinterkaifeck refused to fade. In the 1980s and 1990s, true crime authors revisited the case, scouring archives for overlooked details. Boot prints were remeasured against standardized tread patterns. Photographs of the barn loft spurred debate. Did those pacing tracks mark two boots, or a child's footprints paired with an adult's? In 2007, author Stefan Peterman unearthed a confession letter in a rural attic, penmanship shaky, the writer claiming to be the murderer. But handwriting experts found the script didn't match any known suspect, and the tantalizing document was dismissed as a hoax, likely penned by a local looking to tantalize the curious. In 2014, a team of cold case specialists examined surviving police notes, hoping new criminological methods might yield insights. They concluded that the killer's precise timing, arriving after dark, feeding the goats, entering the loft, then striking the family, indicated intimate knowledge of the household's routines. Whoever committed these murders had lived among the victims long enough to learn their habits and to move undetected among them. Hinterkaifeck remains a study in the terror of the familiar turned alien, of home transformed into a chamber of horrors. The family's personal tragedies, their quiet faith, their daily work, their simple reliance on each other, make the brutality all the more inconceivable. We wonder, how could someone so close commit such a crime? Psychologists point to the power of proximity in violent crime. Perpetrators often know their victims, exploiting trust to gain access. But Hinterkaifeck warped this dynamic to a grotesque extreme. The killer became specter and prey in equal measure, surveilling from the loft, tending to the goats, and then striking when least expected. Folklorists highlight how the murder's isolation amplified its mystique. In a region steeped in legend, wolves howling at full moons, fairies dancing in moonlit fields, Hinterkaifeck's whisper passed into myth. The notion of footsteps on the roof gave rise to tales of a phantom watcher, ensuring that even those who never heard the butcher's blade would still feel the cold brush of his presence. Today, a simple cross and plaque mark the site where the farm once stood. The fields have reverted to pasture, and the chilling farmhouse is no more. Yet visitors still stand in the snowdrifts at twilight, peering into the forest shadow, imagining footsteps overhead, hearing echoes of 6 lives cut short. Every spring, new theories, some grounded, others wild, emerge online. DNA testing of preserved hair samples has been mooted but never realized, as no biological evidence survived. Journals and letters held by descendants occasionally surface, hinting at rivalries or rumors, but each glimpse dissipates into scholarly debate. Hinterkaifeck endures because it resists closure. There is no neat solution, no sense of justice served. Instead, it offers an open wound in the annals of crime, where missing pages in police ledgers and vanished witnesses leave gaping holes that no detective can fill. And in those gaps, the imagination prowls, conjuring footsteps in the snow and the silent watcher above. What compels us to return to this gruesome tableau, to sift through cold records and faded photographs? Perhaps it is the recognition that evil can lurk behind familiar doors, that our sanctuaries may conceal specters of betrayal. Hinterkaifeck reminds us that trust, once broken, cannot be mended by mere facts or theories. It endures as a question, echoing through the corridors of history. And so, as the sun sets again over the fields of Bavaria, the ridge stands quiet, unmarked by footprints, save those we imagine walking among the trees. We leave with no resolution, only the soft urgency of unanswered questions. Who walked those rooftops? Whose hand gripped the mattock? Why did the killer remain tending goats, pacing the loft, before ending 6 lives in one savage night? Perhaps in the hush between shadows at Hinterkaifeck, those questions will forever linger, unanswered, unquiet, and haunting us still.